In 1961, a team of scientists turned adventurers launched into space, and Marvel Comics was born anew. From Fantastic Four's fiery beginnings to Spider-Man's swing through New York's skyline, to the Avengers assembling against impossible odds, Marvel has told stories that have shaped generations. Heroes who remind us of courage in the face of fear, sacrifice for the greater good, and the relentless hope that good can triumph over evil. But lately, the landscape of Marvel feels a little different. The once united tapestry of incredible storytelling now seems tangled in something else. Agendas, identity politics, and creative missteps that have dulled the vibrancy of the universe we've loved for so long. So where do we go from here? Do Marvel's upcoming releases hint at a return to what caught all of our attention almost 2 decades ago? Or are we destined for more lackluster battles with the real villain? The biggest bad of them all, Disney's writer's room. Today we're diving into Marvel's rich history, our personal experiences with the brand that gave us Earth's mightiest heroes, and the state of its cinematic empire. We'll unpack what's working, what isn't, and if, for Christians, there's anything left worth redeeming in the Marvel Universe at all. Because at the end of the day, these heroes have a great power for good storytelling. And as we know, with great power comes great responsibility. And maybe, just maybe, there's hope yet for a redemptive third act on the horizon. So, is your spidey sense tingling? Because it's clobbering time.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Reforming Nerdom podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jordan Cecile, and I am joined today, as always, by P. Nate, aka Pastor Nate, aka Nathaniel Wright, according to his wife. Nate, how are you?
I'm doing well. Literally, my mom and my wife call me Nathaniel, so if you get that going, it's going to get really confusing.
Yes, and we're also joined by Ben of the Cloth, a.k.a. Benjamin, a.k.a. Ben Emery.
Nice. I like that. I also brought along a little friend, Nate. You might like this. In addition to our Luke Skywalker back here, we now have an additional reminder for you to... I don't know. Have you ever? Do you know who this is? Like, have you ever seen?
Where's his
Star Wars
lightsaber? Yeah. I'm never gonna live that down. Like, there is a part of me that was like, let's relaunch all of this and re-record the first bunch of episodes and just start later, because I'm never gonna live that down. Nobody's actually gonna take me seriously, having got that question wrong. But here we are.
In your defense, I could see that that's like a question that it seems so obvious, but in the moment, just to say it, like I can sympathize, especially if you haven't watched it recently.
Just stop. Just stop.
There's those moments where, like, yeah. Anyway, whatever. I'm not going to defend it. I'm here. I'm wearing my green shirt.
That's all right. Well, and in terms of the nicknames, those are I'm going to work on those. I like those. But yeah, you guys maybe in the comments, people can let us know what they think is our better nicknames for the guys. But yeah, Pastor Nate and Ben of the Cloth. I like those good pastor nicknames.
Yeah.
Well, and so yeah, we are Reforming Nerdom, where each and every week we get together and talk about all things nerd culture, all from an unapologetically Christian world view. If you love what we do, you can become a member on Patreon, where you'll get ad-free episodes and exclusive shows, which will include the one we are going to be recording right after this on Marvel versus DC. Which one do we prefer? And you can also watch all of our episodes on YouTube and listen on podcast services around the world. Now, boys, what have you done since we recorded last? What have you done? How have you nerded out in the last little bit?
2 nights ago, my kids and I finally finished The Two Towers, which was awesome. That's my favorite of the 3. And specifically for like the last 2 chapters of The Two Towers, which is Shelob's Lair and the choice of Samwise. Amazing. Kids totally thought Frodo was dead. Spoiler alert if you haven't read it. But yeah, it was great. Fantastic. Like I've been waiting for that for years now to read that to my kids. So
awesome. So I got two things. Number one, I just am getting, so Ben was talking about the Star Wars trading card game that he's getting into with the kiddos. So I've been trying to teach them how to play Magic the Gathering. And I quickly realized that game is far too complicated, and there are far too many inappropriate cards for kids my age. That will likely get put on hold. But the other thing is, so we just started with the kids.
Star Wars cards. You can teach them that one.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing is we actually just started the Last Airbender animated series. So I'm watching that with the kids now. That's going to be
Is that new one or an older one?
No, it's older. So my sister and her husband got that for my kids last year at Christmas, and we kind of tucked it to the side. And they're like, "Oh, you got to see this. The kids will love it." And we tucked it to the side not because we didn't want to see it, because we were doing something else at the time. So we just kind of revisited that, and they've been absolutely loving it. So Last Airbender, and I don't know any of this stuff. Like anime and all that kind of stuff. That's not an area of nerd culture I've ever explored. So, but Last Airbender is very good.
Yeah, that was something I missed growing up. I don't know anything about that. For me, so I've I guess two things. A few nights ago, or I guess maybe it was actually later last week. I finally got the kids set up to. We got playing N64 out in the garage. I set that up, and we were playing Mario Party, and it was so fun watching the kids like rapidly click on the eating the pizza, right? If you remember that one, and like they're just sitting there, and I was like relentlessly trying to just dominate, and I did, and it was great. I'm just sitting there, and they're watching me, and I'm going real fast on it, and they got actually it was really funny. They actually it was Alice and Lily were playing. Now it was Had and I, but he actually did it decently. The pump one, if you guys remember that, where he had to pump up the rocket ship to shoot up, and Alice and Lily like legitimately beat us, and like they just got in this like amazing rhythm, and it was so fun. They had a blast. So that was a lot of fun. And then I've also been. This kind of brings up a question I have for you guys. Is I've been reading a book. It's actually a series by a guy, and maybe you've heard of it. Called the first book was called "The Name of the Wind." Are you familiar with "The Name of the Wind"? Patrick Rothfuss. The second one is "The Wise Man's Fear," I think is what it is. But anyways, it's this like fiction series, which is really good. It's a fantasy series. And Ben, I mentioned it to you at church recently because he's only released 2 of the 3.
Oh yeah, right.
And so then here I am now. Like I went into it knowing it because the third book has been promised.
It's been like a decade or something.
It's been like 12 years since he has released the second book, and he keeps saying that he's going to release the third book, and he hasn't. It's been 13 years, and so I was reluctant to read it because knowing that, well, is this series ever going to finish? But then I kept hearing from everybody, oh, it's so amazing. The story's so good. He's such a good writer. All of that is true. But so the question I have for you guys is, would you have started a series not knowing if the author was actually going to finish it?
No. 100% no.
Yeah, I don't think I could do that. There's too many things like Firefly. Okay, so Firefly is I recommend Firefly to people all the time. It's one of the best shows that never got its fair shake, and it only did 1 season, and it's still fantastic. But it's hard to encourage people to do it because they're just going to be heartbroken when they get to the end of it and realize that it ended without any resolutions. And I mean, Whedon did the show Serenity to kind of wrap up the story, and it shows how brilliant the whole story arc would have been. But Firefly is a good example of the heartbreak that can happen when you get too invested in a show that gets canceled or that doesn't get finished.
Yeah, there's just too much stuff out there that I still haven't read or watched or listened to that is finished that I'm not gonna waste my time with something that's just gonna leave me disappointed.
Although that said, here's the thing. One of the reasons we all hate, well, there are many reasons we all hate the new Star Wars movies and series and stuff, but one of the reasons is because the speculation and fan fiction is actually better than what's the new canon stuff
Yeah.
is, right? So there is something to be said
R-
about leaving it open ended and like fan
Honestly,
fiction kind of taking over.
my favorite era of Star Wars fandom was the 90s, when there was no official Star Wars
Yeah,
content, and
yeah.
there was just video games and books, and none
Yeah.
of it, like, uh
There wasn't
like
over-regulation with the
everything
story, right?
contradicted everything else, and nobody cared, and like it was just like the stories were amazing. Yeah, like that. So you're right, like there is an element to that, but yeah, I don't know, I don't think I could do it though.
It's tough though, because like it is really good, but it's also really interesting knowing that this guy, the author Patrick Rothfuss, from what I understand, has gone completely woke, and you see that in the second book, where there's things there where it's like, oh wow, you didn't say that in the last one, or like that's you're getting and there's even a section I got to, and a friend had told me that, hey, just like heads up, and he's like, you'll know, and you get there, it's like, okay, wow. So then thankfully you don't even have to keep reading, you can just skip ahead. It's not, but even not that it was like super explicit, but it was like enough where it's like, oh, so that's kind of where you're at now. But then it was interesting because Ben, when we were talking about it, you had a really interesting thought as to why he's not able to finish it.
As I do.
I mean, like that one good thought that you had that one time. It's but and how it's like he probably doesn't actually know how to finish the story, because
Yeah,
he's like
he didn't create those characters to be woke like 20 years ago. And so now he's trying to figure out, he either probably loves those characters too much to make them something that they were never supposed to be, or B, he doesn't love his characters and he's trying to figure out how to make these unwoke characters woke, and he can't figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, and it's disappointing, but I mean it's a great book. From anybody who's a fantasy fan, they're like, you have to read it. It's so good. So I am, and it is good, but he certainly doesn't hold a candle to Brandon Sanderson. So it's still been worthwhile, but yeah.
There are, and this is just generally in like sci-fi and like fantasy, whether it's film or books. I find that there are some authors, like Tolkien is obviously the easiest example. He's good at making the whole world, right? He's a world builder, and then the stories he tells within the world are good, but like primarily his main thing is he's a world builder. And then there's guys who are good at like setting up problems and questions and mysteries,
Yeah.
and they set it up, but they're not good at delivering answers. Right. And then there's some guys who are like, and I think C.S. Lewis is this way, for example, where you're kind of meandering into a story and you're like, yeah, this is good, but the way it all culminates, the way it draws together, the way the thing ends, you're like, oh, that was brilliant. So like different authors and different like content creators have different, like a good example of this is like Lost, right? Fantastic at setting up a world, setting up problems, asking questions. But the minute J.J. Abrams ever has to start answering questions, it's terrible, right? Cloverfield, all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So
Star Wars Episode 9.
there you go. So anyway, all that to say, like, I think different people excel at different aspects of things, and sometimes it's fun to leave it open ended, because people who love the stories can actually sometimes create better answers and ongoing adventures than the authors themselves, who are very good at a particular thing.
Well, a good example of that is Brandon Sanderson with The Wheel of Time, right? Like I haven't read it, but Ben, I think you said
I read the whole
finish it?
thing start to finish, believe it or not.
Yeah, and I think it's unanimous that Brandon Sanderson ended that series better than Jordan ever would have been able to.
Jordan started really well, and then the middle section, when it's time to start wrapping things up, got unbelievably tedious and like really even difficult to even finish reading the series. And then he died, and Sanderson picked it up and did a like really good job, a far better job than I think Jordan ever would have done wrapping everything up.
Yeah, I mean that's what Sanderson does, but
That just reminds me. I don't know if you guys know this. Do you remember the movie AI?
Is that
Had the
the
kid
Will
in it
Smith
from
one?
Sixth Sense. No, I had the kid in it from Sixth Sense. It had Judd.
Oh, is that? Oh shoot, who is that? Yeah, I know exactly the one you mean.
Yeah, it came out
There was
years
a really
ago.
famous actor in that. Was that like Tom Hanks or something? I don't know. I can't remember, but
No.
I know the movie you mean.
Yeah. So that movie, AI, artificial intelligence, Stanley Kubrick was the director, and Stanley Kubrick is fantastic, right? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and he did, why How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Like he's just fantastic. And Stanley Kubrick ended the movie, but he died in the middle of it, and so it wasn't fully done. And Steven Spielberg, who is a huge Stanley Kubrick fan, came in and finished the movie. And so if you've seen that movie, there's the scene where he's like the kid he's the cyborg, he's the robot, right? And it was like, if you see the blue fairy, right, you'll turn into a real person. And so there's this moment where he's in the submarine under the water and he sees the statue of the blue fairy and he's just sitting there, and that's where Stanley Kubrick is going to end the movie. Like this, like total heart-wrenching moment. Like, nope, guess all of it, and Steven Spielberg came in to finish the movie, and he added his own ending, and that's where the aliens came in and the whole thing where it gets totally gay at the end of it. So Steven Spielberg totally ruined that movie, because if you watch it and you end it where he's sitting up against the glass of the submarine thing, looking at the blue fairy, you're like, that is hauntingly beautiful. And then all of a sudden, Spielberg comes in and it's about aliens and all this gay stuff. So
It's funny. I'm reading a book right now called "Tending the Heart of Virtue," and it's just all about like reading the old fairy tales, like using the old fairy tales, and like not the crappy Disney version of all the old fairy tales, to like teach virtue to children, and how they actually did. And Pinocchio was one of them, and just the way I honestly I don't think I ever watched that AI movie, other than like maybe bits and pieces on TV or whatever, but that sounds like exactly like Pinocchio. There's even a
yeah.
blue fairy that's like turning him into a boy, and
Yeah, it's AI.
yeah.
AI
Anyway,
was actually following the original fable of Pinocchio, but
yeah.
applying
Okay,
it
well
to
that
like
makes sense
the
then.
modern technological future kind of thing, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Jude
Stanley
Law, by the
Kubrick.
way.
Stanley
I
Kubrick
just
is
looked it up.
brilliant. Yeah.
It was Jude Law, not Tom Hanks. Not even close.
There you go, Jude Law. Yeah.
All right, before we get into our topic of the show, I was just wanting to bring a couple articles that were in the news recently to your guys' attention that are fit in with our last episode on DEI and wokeism. So this one article, I think you guys will really like this. This was from John Trent. He's over at Fandom Pulse, and the title of the article is "Dozens of Financial Advisors Warn Corporate America That DEI Initiatives Are a Liability." And in the article, he writes this: dozens of financial advisors warn corporate America that in the wake of Donald Trump being elected the 47th president, after the 45th and 46th, but 47th president of the United States, that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies are now a liability. In an open letter urging corporations to get rid of DEI departments and policies, the financial advisors who collectively manage over $16 billion in assets declared, quote, "This November, the American electorate overwhelmingly rejected the ideological takeover of political and civic life by narrow-minded identity politics. Critical race theory, CRT, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, purport to promote belonging and inclusion, but in reality sacrifice true diversity and equal opportunity by focusing only on differences based on skin color, sex, or religious status," end quote. Next, they warned, it is now a liability for any institution to tout adherence to DEI ideology. Recent Supreme Court decisions have cast serious doubt of the legality of DEI, which has led to full-scale legal assault on DEI, according to the Wall Street Journal. The data underlying the push for DEI have been exposed as overstated at best, or worse, downright false. And then it ends with the letter then made the choice, these corporations have abundantly, that's weirdly, but they have made it very clear you stand at an important crossroads. Either you can heed the voice of the American people, your shareholders, customers, and employees, or you can bow to fringe activists who demand that you double down on a failing ideology.
Ooh.
Yeah. Dang. I mean, that's what we talked about though. It's like you may have these individuals or even entire corporations like Kathleen Kennedy / Disney who have this, this obviously DEI woke agenda. But like at some point the money talks, right? Like the money guys in the background are not going to sit here and watch movie after movie after movie lose hundreds of millions of dollars and just say nothing. Like eventually the money talks.
Yeah.
And I love how this is being tied to Trump and Vance, who obviously winning the election and hopefully, barring some assassination or something, is going to be the president. And so it's just interesting how so many Christians are like, how could I vote for Donald Trump? He's a pagan man. He's evil. He's immoral. It's like, yes,
he's gonna make Star Wars great again. That's why.
and I'll take that, right? I'll take the little win because he's like, it's actually bearing good fruit,
Right.
even though, yes, there's a lot of stuff. It's going to take time and it's not happening overnight. But I mean, so here we see, like, we can thank Donald Trump for probably less lesbian space witches and less,
maybe not
gay
none,
rock,
but less.
and like less gay rock guys who, what is it in like Thor: Love and Thunder? I don't know if you guys have watched that, but it's like,
Oh, I never did.
yeah, and apparently they reproduce by two gay rocks holding hands by the water or something like that, and all of a sudden another gay rock comes into existence. It's like Korg's the somethings that starts with a K, but it's like, you know what, less of that would be good. You know what? So thank you, Donald Trump, for making less of that. And then so the second article, which is also tied to that, this is from Paul Tassi over at Forbes, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dragon Age. I think we maybe mentioned it in a past episode, or we talked about it. Dragon Age and Veilguard. So the title of this article is Dragon Age Veilguard gets snubbed at the Game Awards. Do you guys ever watch the Game Awards? That's like one of my nerdy things I do every year. I watch the Game Awards and I get excited.
I actually don't. I did back in the day when I was more of a gamer, but I don't now just because it's a bunch of games I haven't played and won't play and all that kind of stuff. But man, Dragon Age and Mass Effect were like my two all-time favorite video games. So let me hear it. Dragon Age.
All right. So from the article, again, this is written by Paul Tassi, and the links will be in the show notes for anybody who wants to go check it out. So it starts with 10 years ago in 2014, Dragon Age Inquisition racked up dozens of game awards, including the big one at the Game Awards. Now in 2024,
great game, by the way, great game.
Yeah, the next game in the series, Dragon Age Veilguard, just endured a near complete absence of nominations for the Game Awards, landing only a single one for accessibility, which is not one of the mainstream prizes. Even as a fan of the game, the author says, there's no way to spin this. This is bad for BioWare attempting to stage a big comeback with higher quality offerings than the past decade, which included the likes of Mass Effect Andromeda, which I don't know if you played that, Nate, but that was a bomb for Mass Effect fans generally.
Terrible. Andromeda was terrible, yeah. Once they closed off the Reapers trilogy, we got to do a whole episode on Mass Effect, man. I love that game. Keep going.
Yeah, I've never played a minute of it, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. And then another bombing with Anthem, which was hyped to be like the next Destiny type game, bombed, terrible. Anyways, he continues and says, in this situation is at least a little strange, as the same outlets that are part of the nominating body of the Game Awards scored it pretty well, an 82 on Metacritic, just 3 points below Inquisition's 85. 0 major nominations. And then further down, he says, before the nominations were announced, there was this ongoing narrative that the liberal-leaning games press would push Dragon Age to multiple nominations it did not deserve, even Game of the Year, ignoring more controversial games like Wukong. Instead, Dragon Age only landed the accessibility nomination, while Wukong got a Game of the Year slot. And then it ends with, this is a genuinely strange situation. Not that Dragon Age should have dominated all these categories with nominations, but again, this was a game that was well received by critics and still boasts mostly positive scores on a platform like Steam and a 4.5-star rankings on consoles. But this is now a year where Star Wars Outlaws has more significant nominations than Dragon Age. That is honestly hard to believe. And BioWare needs to hope its new Mass Effect game goes better, as there clearly is just something missing here that has not resonated with a wide enough range of people. End of article. So it's interesting how you see that.
Can you help me here for a second? Because I'm not. I've never played Dragon Age. I'm not familiar with anything that you just said. Like, is
So the context of
are
Dragon
they
Age
not
right
getting
now.
nominated because the game sucked, or are they not getting nominated because the nominating committee sucks?
So I think what we're seeing here is a couple things. So for those who might not know or weren't listening to the previous episodes, Dragon Age, the Veilguard is getting like dragged through the mud because of its like absolute garbage dialogue and story and pushing transgenderism stuff, gay stuff, and like really, really poorly. So yeah, I probably should have set that up before because that was like it is just so overt that I think the game's producer is actually a trans guy. And so like and some of the videos that people are posting about these I mean the big thing about Dragon Age and Mass Effect is choice, right? And like you choose your own adventure in a sense. Like but like
right.
you get to choose things. And in the past, if you wanted to be all weird and creepy and fetishy, you could go and do really weird stuff. They gave you that option, at least in some of those games, but you didn't have to. Like it wasn't something that they forced you to do. But in this one, there's times where they're forcing you to play along this game producer's weird fetishes, and like you have to endure some of it, and some of it is just super cringe. But what's interesting with this article is how you see that when it came to reviewing the game, all of these outlets. So the Game Awards largely is the award winners are determined by news outlets. So these predetermined news outlets get to chime in and say who's their game of the year, who's their best RPG, best action game, best acting performance or whatever. And so they all were just like touting it because of all this negative press coming out about all this woke nonsense in it. And they're like, this is amazing. Like, how dare you, you bigots? Like, this game is, amazing. We need to celebrate it. But then the proof is in the pudding when it comes to actually nominating the game. Even the critics who were publicly because we don't want to be the news outlet that gives it a bad rating because then we're just going to be grouped in with all these racist bigots. But then when it's not made aware, like it's not public,
when it's anonymous, yeah,
exactly, right. And so you even see that these people, like the inconsistency in it, where when their name and brand is on the line, oh, this is amazing. We're like, this game is fantastic. It's incredible. Why would anybody have a problem with it, you bigots? And then when it comes down to it, it's like, oh, you all hated it as well. Like this is actually just a garbage game.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, and it's interesting. So when you put those two articles together, you hope that what ends up happening in nerd culture, generally speaking, is what's sort of happening in corporate America, where they say, look where the dollar leads, right? So obviously I prefer that the motivation would be, I've seen the glory of Jesus Christ and I want to be obedient to his word. And therefore I'm going to make games and movies and shows that glorify him. That would be a great motivation. But I'll take, if that's not what I can get, I'll take the like, hey, we're losing money. Let's stop making so many weird gay characters. I'm cool with that motivation.
Yeah, like God made the world in a certain way, though. Whether people, acknowledge him and obey him willingly or lovingly, it's like, yeah, God still made like free market systems work the way they work so that people pay for stuff they like, and like, so either way, it's happening because of God.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
So I mean, my whole takeaway from this is that some Christian game designer needs to make one of these like choose your path type RPG games with the option of choosing these weird fetishy things, but the moment you choose it, you just get struck by lightning and sent to Sheol.
Just Sodom and Gomorrah style.
And game over. Like you don't even get to restart.
Heaven.
Like it's like
the disk dissolves inside the system. Like, yeah,
you have chosen poorly.
Please spend another $70 on the next game and repent and make better choices.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're learning, and I think they are. I think we're going to start seeing some better stuff.
Even if it didn't go that far, if it's just like you made this weird choice and you got into this gay relationship and you got the gay animated thing or whatever, and then your character gets monkeypox and loses a bunch of his like stamina. He's just super weak and he dies in the next fight. Like,
Oh boy.
I had something else I was going to say, but probably best not to. Yeah.
This is already going to be a PG-13 episode for the monkeypox.
Yeah, that's right. Well, in the spirit of learning lessons, why don't we get to our topic of the show today, which is Marvel. Can Disney reclaim the Marvel magic? We've last week we talked a little bit about Marvel and kind of how this negative trajectory that it's on. But in the last couple of weeks, there's actually been a lot of new trailers coming out. We've all watched them, and in the future, we're gonna try to do reactions to these trailers and stuff as they're coming out. But there was quite a few. There's I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago they released. Marvel did what was it? It was a look ahead, I think they called it, and it showed a whole bunch of the shows that are coming to Disney Plus in 2025, a number of movie trailers for new movies that are coming out, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to just talk about, can Marvel get back to what it was, and can we see Marvel get better? So before we do look ahead, Ben, why don't you give us a little bit of a history of Marvel? Because I know you've put together some of the background that a lot of people, I think, don't actually know. They just know Marvel as it is today. They don't know Marvel where it started and how we got today. So why don't you?
Yeah, I thought it would be helpful. Like, so we're talking about the MCU basically. When we say Marvel today, we're not really talking about comic books per se. Like, obviously, people still buy and read comic books, but 90% of the revenue that Marvel brings in is, from the Marvel Cinematic Universe now. That's what people know. That's what people understand Marvel to be. So I thought it would be helpful, just give like a 5-minute where Marvel started up to the MCU. And I'll give you guys some trivia questions along the way, see how much you know about Marvel history. So you got the early days, right? DC is where comic books essentially started as we know them, which predates Marvel by a half decade or so. But then Marvel starts in the late 30s, 1939. And do you know the original name of Marvel Comics before it became Marvel Comics? Anybody know?
Action Adventure?
Ooh.
Not even close.
Yeah, it doesn't
right,
have
timely
Yeah.
publications.
Okay.
Timely Publications, 1939, by a guy named Martin Goodman. And the first Marvel Comics #1 featured what famous, and I say famous in very scare quotes, superhero?
I think it's an
Actually, well, there's
one.
actually two. There's two. One of them still exists. One of them doesn't. In terms of known Marvel characters.
I think I remember looking at this. Namor.
Yeah. So Submariner is one of them.
Yeah.
He's the one that's like still around. The other one, the name is still around, but it's a totally different character. Does that help at all? Okay, so it's the name was reused with one of the Fantastic Four. It's the Human Torch. But the original Human Torch was this like robot android type dude, totally different character. So these
Human Torch who had nothing to do with fire. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, like he did. But he was not actually human. That's the irony of it. He was like an android. So, these incredibly famous Marvel characters, the Human Torch and the Submariner, are what laid the groundwork for what Marvel became. But like they were competing with like Superman, Batman, with DC. So you can kind of tell, obviously, DC really took the lead in the early days of the comic book wars. Yeah. But it didn't. So the 1940s is really when Marvel like peaks. So call it the golden age of Marvel. And you're going to see names like Jack Kirby. You probably know his name as the artist. And then Joe Simon was the writer of 1941. Captain America, right? So you have World War II. The first issue of Captain America is the cover is Captain America punching, like uppercutting Hitler, and obviously to great fanfare. So Captain America becomes super popular. Marvel really hits its stride. But after World War II ends, kind of the superhero thing just starts to get less popular. And so
There's no Nazis to kill.
yeah, there's no more Nazis to kill, right? There's no more like real bad guys to worry about. So um, the whole comic book industry really takes a hit, and then and just like the style of comic starts to be less about like superheroes, and it's more like the gritty, like film noir sort of thing. So really different. But then in the '60s we get sort of a rebirth of the superhero movement, and that will be under the leadership of none other than Stan Lee. And again, Jack Kirby's still around, and they create in like rapid succession. In 1961, you have the Fantastic Four. So the Fantastic Four were created sort of as a in competition with the Justice League, because they needed like a buddy group like DC had. So you get Fantastic Four, which was like wildly popular, which is funny. Like if you think today, Fantastic Four isn't even on your radar, basically, but was really one of their big hits, wildly popular. And then their biggest hit came in 1962, which was Spider-Man.
Right.
So you have 61 Fantastic Four, 62 Spider-Man, 63 X-Men, and then also in 1963 Iron Man. So they call this, right? So you have the 40s, which is the golden age. They call the late 50s, early 60s the silver age of Marvel, where they just had hit after hit after hit. And then you get the bronze age of Marvel in the 70s. And again, like it's more back to less superhero-y stuff and more like they deal with social issues and the Vietnam War and stuff like that was kind of popular at the time, had an audience, but was nothing like some of their more popular stuff. And then you do get at the end of this period, though, you get X-Men. Really, like some of the stories around the X-Men comics really took off and became their most iconic franchise for that time period into the late 80s. And then we started to get all the crossovers. So this is like the early roots of what the MCU is today. So you have like the X-Men featuring in Spider-Man comics, and you have Fantastic Four appearing in it. So you have all these storylines that intertwine and interconnect, and you have the Secret Wars, which I think we're going to see coming up in the MCU soon, like that storyline. You have the Infinity War storyline starting to take root in times like that. So that was the 80s. Then in the 90s, you had like a weirdly popular time, but they also financially went completely bankrupt. And so you had like comic books in general, just nobody was buying comic books, and there was no money to be had in television or movies with superheroes. So the company went bankrupt, even though they had like very popular animated shows like Spider-Man, X-Men, all that kind of stuff, which were two of my favorite animated shows ever as a kid. So quick trivia, the Hobgoblin in the animated Spider-Man series, you know who voices the Hobgoblin?
Ooh.
Nate, you'll never, ever get this one. That's a hint.
Oh, that's a hint? I got nothing. I can't even think
it's Mark Hamill.
Oh, I was gonna say him because he does the Joker.
Yeah, he's a more successful voice actor than he ever was a real actor. But he's the Joker in the Batman animated series. He's also the Hobgoblin in Spider-Man. And then this is kind of a weird one, but any of your kids or wives or anything watch, or do you guys know the series Heartland? CBC
Yeah,
Canadian special.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I think Colleen
Yeah.
watched it a bit.
So there's an older guy, like a middle-aged guy. His character's name is Tim on Heartland, and you would never ever know it because he's not even one tiny bit French. But he voices Gambit in the X-Men animated series, which I thought was hilarious when I found that out.
Gambit was one of my favorite characters too.
He was awesome. He was one of the top. So that's kind of that era, the 90s. They go bankrupt. They have to sell off like the rights to everything to Fox and to, this, that, and the other thing. And then we have in the 2000s, right? You get the X-Men movies made by Fox. You get the early Spider-Man movies made by Fox or by Sony. And,
yeah.
Yeah. And then in 2008, of course, we have the MCU officially starting, right? Earlier before that, you have some like the Hulk movies and some of these other not MCU, but Marvel movies. Yeah, exactly. And then he gets recast and whatnot. But 2008, the official beginning with Iron Man of the MCU, which leads us basically to where we are now, right? You have like the different phases and whatever, but kind of culminates in Infinity Wars, Endgame, and then to wherever the heck we are now in whatever.
Did you guys follow like the Infinity War arc when it was in comic form?
I was all in.
Yeah.
When it was current, I was all there.
Yeah. Like when they first teased it out about the Infinity Gems in the MCU movie, I was like so pumped. Like that there's those nerd moments where nobody else gets it because they didn't follow the comics and they just went down the movie series. But like I remember I'm like, oh, Infinity Gauntlet, like that I love that series, partially because I was a huge, like Thanos was one of my favorite villains. Silver Surfer was actually one of my favorite heroes.
Yeah. Did they ever wreck him in that Fantastic Four movie?
Yeah.
And now he's a chick in the new one.
In the new one, it's going to be a girl. I know. I saw that.
Rod.
Not learning their lesson. But when you guys, I admittedly didn't read a lot of comics when I was younger. So like for you guys, what was
I actually didn't either. I did a little, but my main source was like the animated shows.
I was straight up like that was when I was a kid, I'd get my allowance, $2 allowance. I'd walk down to the corner store and I'd buy like the newest issue of Silver Surfer or Daredevil or Batman or Superman or whatever. Like I was a huge comic book fan. To this day, I have hundreds of comics.
Hence how you made 10 grand on selling comics when you were in your 20s.
That's right. Yeah.
So your nerd level has gone up just like a little bit in order to be able to fix your lightsaber issue. But not quite.
Don't say you have a lightsaber issue. You're going to get into trouble again.
Lightsaber's this high.
Oh,
we won't talk about Nate's lightsaber issues, but for me, I didn't really get into Marvel. I think the first big thing for me was the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. Like that was like really. I watched Spider-Man growing up. I watched like X-Men as a kid, but like that was for me because I was like Nate, you had said before as well. I was more of a DC guy. So the Batman animated show, Smallville, which I've started watching again, but we'll save that for
hold up.
So good, so good.
Right.
Anyways, we'll talk more about that later. But like as we even just like think about our past with Marvel, like I wasn't really a huge Marvel fan until the MCU started to really build momentum and they started doing the whole cross story arc thing and. Like that. I wasn't really huge, but then I'd say in the last, up until they started desecrating it in the last, I think they're in phase 5 now. So would phase 3 of the MCU have been when was it?
I think phase 3 was the first, was like immediately following Endgame. I think.
Yeah.
Like it was like phase 1 was up to whatever, like Ultron or something, and then phase 2 was up to Endgame, I think.
Okay, yeah, I can't remember the exact, but
anyway, whatever. Yeah, but like there's not a lot I have consumed post Endgame. Like I did try. I tried some of it right off the bat. Like, I don't know. You can't even remember what some of them were. Like Shang-Chi, I remember I watched, which
Was that
wasn't
good?
the
I
worst.
had his comics.
It was a fun like kung fu movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
like
it was
with some
fine.
cool fight scenes and stuff. Like it actually
Iron
wasn't too
Fist,
bad.
right?
But
Iron Fist, was that before or after?
that was one of the Netflix ones, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it was. I
Which-
heard it was absolutely horrible.
It had
which
its
brings
moments,
in
but yeah, generally.
the only one of those, because those actually got pretty raunchy, if I remember. Like I think Punisher got pretty sexualized. I think what was the one with the girl? The girl lead character, Jennifer Jones. No, not Jen. That's a curler.
No, I don't know.
What's her name? Something Jones.
Curler.
Alex Jones. No, not Alex Jones either.
Talk. Oh man.
Tell me you're Canadian without telling me you're Canadian when you list off the most famous female curler.
She's the one with the tight braids, wasn't she?
Now, are we talking about the curler, or are we talking about the Netflix show? No,
the curler.
No, she had like blonde hair. She's like, anyways, we don't need to. We're talking about curling, although I would. But yeah, like the Netflix shows, like they definitely had a darker feel to them. But we were talking about this offline, listeners, and just know like this. We talked about this stuff not just on the episodes, because we were discussing whether the Daredevil Netflix show was better than anything Disney has output in the MCU. So what do you guys, you both have watched Daredevil? I don't know if I haven't watched like the last part of it. I watched the first, I think, 2 seasons of it. What do you guys like? What would you guys say in that? Is Daredevil Netflix show, where does it stack up amongst the MCU stuff?
So, like in terms of MCU, I would literally say number 1. I mean, don't get me wrong, the whole like Easter egg thing, we've talked about this before, the whole Easter egg thing, and how like, there was this cultural thing where everybody was kind of, can't wait for the next one. That was really cool. So that added a sort of, this giant moment. But Daredevil on Netflix season 1, I would maintain, outside of maybe the movie The Dark Knight, is the best superhero on film ever. That season was fantastic. Everything about it, like just the complexity of the characters, the acting, the story writing, everything about that was just beautiful. And I might be biased because Daredevil was actually my favorite Marvel character. I was more of a DC guy, but
you must
Daredevil
have hated Ben Affleck so bad.
Oh man, it was terrible, terrible. But the Netflix Daredevil was incredible.
Yeah, I watched season 1 for sure, and I think I watched maybe season 2 as well, but I don't think I ever finished it. Not because it wasn't great. I really enjoyed it, and I'm actually I'm on like episode 3 or 4. I'm tuning back in after watching the trailer for the new one there, and it's great. I don't know if I would say it's better. So you guys, spoiler alert, not that it's a spoiler because we said it in the first episode. Like you guys were both DC over Marvel. I'm way like more lighthearted in my comic book enjoyment. Like I'm here for a good fight and a good laugh more than I am for like the Joker, just causing chaos and like the super dark gritty stuff. Which is it's good, but it's just not my favorite thing to live in for too long. So just because of that, I'd say it's not my favorite. But in terms of just like quality content, writing, like I don't know, it's probably better in that sense than maybe any of the MCU movies.
The thing that they captured with Daredevil, and it was part of the comics as well, but they really captured it in that short series, was that the anxiety that you sometimes felt, like when you're a Superman fan, even to like when you're a Batman fan, right? Like Batman as well always thinks his way out. He's always a step ahead. He gets into trouble, obviously, but generally you're not ever worried about him. Daredevil, you are consistently worried about. Like you're like, oh, this might be the time when he just loses and dies. Like he's just And they captured that really well. Like the scene where, like, so he's all beaten up, he's bloody, right? Because he doesn't actually have, like, Wolverine's regeneration. He doesn't actually have Superman's, steel skin. But so he's just a dude. And that hallway scene is probably one of the best, like, cinematography, like everything about that is just beautiful. But like the anxiety that you're feeling, like, I don't know if he's going to make it. Like, I don't think anything else has really captured that, where it actually induces a sort of anxiety in the watcher where you're worried for the hero. And I don't think many things do that well. Endgame captured that, right? Endgame did, because like Thanos was so powerful. But it's not just Daredevil captures it not out of the power of the villains, but out of the, like, humanness and the frailty of the hero, which is cool.
Yeah, I think the reason why I often like the DC stuff or have more in the past is they're good movies for, like, as movies. They're like the cinematography is excellent, the acting is excellent, the music, like, as like a film, they're not just capitalizing on Chris Hemsworth, who's just able to inflate his muscles insanely fast, and big jacked guys, and like there's something about like the mood and the tension and the actual like actors' performances where like nobody is going to be winning an award in a Marvel movie for best actor, whereas like Heath Ledger like actually did such a spectacular job in that role. And so that's where I think I've always appreciated that about it. Like they're not just trying to make an actiony superhero movie, which those are fine. I love those. But like they're actually just like as a movie itself, like the product, the things that make a good movie, a lot of the more of the DC movies have seemed to do that. And Daredevil did that just so well.
Totally.
In kind of capturing that. And I think it often does end up being a little grittier, and but I dig that. So but I think like one of the things that Marvel just in the last few years I think is doing better, a lot better than DC is video games. And Ben, I think you were saying that you were playing with your boys with the Spider-Man.
Yeah, we fired up Spider-Man just, I don't know, this past week, a few days ago or whatever, for the first time, and kind of forgot that we even had it, sort of thing, like in a couple years. And like what a just fun, like, even just like story aside, just like swinging through New York City on your webs. Like it's just, yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah, like I played it with my kids, and then you have Spider-Man, then Miles Morales, which is actually, I look at that as like a Christmas game now, because it came out of 5 years ago now. But it came out at Christmas when the PS5 launched, and then it's set during Christmas time, and so it's like, to me, like a Christmas game that I actually want to play at Christmas time now because it's set at Christmas. And but yeah, like Marvel has really invested in the Marvel video games to a degree. Like DC, they've had a couple games come out in the last few years. Like one of them was
the Arkham games were pretty popular, weren't they? I didn't play them.
Yeah, they were hugely popular. And then so the studio that was behind them, I can't remember if it was Avalanche or, oh darn it, I'm drawing a blank. But they've come out with, there's been a couple games that have come out. One of them was you played as non-Batman characters. Gotham Knights, I think, is maybe what it was, and it just tanked. It wasn't well received. And then they came out with something versus the Justice League. Oh wow, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on these games, but it was just an absolute dud as well. But then Marvel is coming out with a lot more. Like Spider-Man is just a massive success. They're coming out with the same studio, Insomniac, which made Spider-Man. They're coming out with Wolverine, which I actually think could be really cool.
Could be, definitely could be
a Wolverine character. But even in that, like we see in Spider-Man, the second one, like the problems of Disney's Marvel is coming into that as well, where there's a side mission where you had to go and help this guy ask his boyfriend to go to prom with him, and it's like, are you kidding me? Right? And it's like, how can I?
That's the DEI, like, oh, we got to get some gay content in here. Let's just make a side mission where, like, so stupid. But
Joe,
so
you're
this
the
goes
you're
to
the you're the gay
question of
guy in
the
the
episode.
writer room. Can you make us a gay story? Like,
Yeah.
oh man.
And
But
so it's like
this
that's
goes to the
where
question of the episode, right? Is like, okay, do we think that Disney can Disney recapture the magic? I watched those trailers. So I watched I think the new Daredevil looks fantastic. Wilson Fisk, like the guy
oh
who's like he
oh
is such a good
My only
actor,
problem
such a
with
good.
Fisk in the trailer though is he's like way too fit and trim. Like he
Yeah,
I
looks
he
know
really
really good.
the
I
actor really
know
trimmed down, but he's a great
Yeah.
actor. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
But
he
see, he
is.
was never fat, right? That was the whole thing. Like everybody thinks he's this big fat guy, but he was just super wide. Like he's
Yeah.
just this huge muscle mass kind of guy,
Yeah.
right? But that looks fantastic. What do you guys think of Thunderbolts?
I
I
was
mean,
for it.
it
I liked
looks fine.
it.
I don't love the idea. It's like I kind of look at it as Marvel's version of what's the DC where it's like all the bad guys form
Justice
the
League. No, the
No,
Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad.
Suicide. I look. It's
That's
like
it.
their Suicide Squad. That's like way less dark and more lighthearted. Because it's like the guys that are kind of fringy, not really good guys, form up, make a team, and
Yeah.
do good guy things. Which like it could be fine. Like it's got like the Marvel cleverness and the jokes and like there were some legit funny moments in that trailer, and I like Bucky. I love Bucky. He's actually one of my favorite
I
characters
agree.
in
Yeah,
the
totally agree.
MCU. Should have been Captain America, by the way. So like I'm okay with that. The whole like and so like the two because what was the other one?
Captain
Captain
America.
America. That was the other one
Yeah, Brave New World. Yeah,
with Ross, right? President Ross, General Ross, whatever. Like he is Thunderbolt. Like
Yeah.
that's right. So like those two are gonna connect somehow with Red Hulk. Joining that Thunderbolt squad somehow or some way. So I don't know, maybe.
I think I guess I'm hopeful for the first time. So I guess here's what I would
I
throw out
agree.
there. I have zero confidence in Disney, but I think with the tides turning culturally, and I think that the election really was you linked to that article earlier, but I think the election really did show, and I think as the almighty dollar will affect a lot of these big studios, I think if they can walk back, the problem is Disney was outright very vocal about they want transgender characters, they want a gay character in every show. Like they went way up with it. So whether they'll walk that back, I doubt, but they might just pretend they never said it and just do now, because the reality is even that article, like the problem with all this is it's just populist stuff, right? Like now that more people are against it, we're not going to do that. I'm fine with that. Like I'm fine with whatever the motivation is. So am I hopeful? I think that's the whole point is when you are looking at creating something ideologically and we have to infuse this gay stuff, you get the Dragon Age game that bombs. So if they can get back to what recaptured the magic, like what made the Marvel Cinematic Universe work is likable actors playing likable characters, let the actors have fun, connect dots so that you go from one show and you have to watch the other or whatever. I think they could. It just all depends on whether or not they take this as a moment to turn around, or if they're going to keep going the way of Marvel Girl or whatever.
Yeah, don't choose the way of pain, as Sauron would say.
That's right.
like because they have to get back to having characters that people actually like and they're not being lectured by. Because
exactly.
that's right now where if you're just going to get up there and lecture me about oppression and class struggles and stuff like that, and don't do it. But that's the thing I liked about the Thunderbolts trailer is it was actually funny. Like the Marvel wit that really won everybody over. It's like, oh, it has that. What's the guy? The red, what's his name? David Harbour's the actor, but like
the big guy
in the trailer, the Russian guy. It's like you actually seem funny, and Lawrence, I don't even know how to pronounce her last name, but like she actually seems like, again, she's just like a tough girl assassin. It's like, okay, I mean,
she's a little bit insufferable for me, but
the actress, and then so that's actually one of the things that before I would have said, like, man, just give us another Captain America movie, give us another Hulk thing. But it's like the actors that play those characters now, I really don't care to watch them because like Chris Evans and Mark Ruffalo and like they all had that nonsense video that they posted just before the election talking about how great Kamal is. It's like, okay, like you're all done. Like just move on. And I hope that they can usher in a new set of characters. Like yes, I wish Captain America was not actor or portrayed by Chris Evans and but I think there's something here. I want to try to not be so pessimistic about it. It's like, if there's something decent, let's celebrate that. And like, I mean, the election just happened. These movies were filmed probably a couple years ago, or at least a year ago, and are now just like, it's still in editing and all that to come out in 2025. So
there's a lot you can do in editing and post-production.
And that's where I wonder, like, I'm wondering how much of it is going to be
like, make it look like Nate picked the wrong lightsaber color.
Yeah. Oh, that's I'm not editing that. Well, because actually the Captain America Falcon and Winter Soldier show that was on Disney Plus, they had to re-edit that a ton because it was actually more a story about a virus getting out, and it was happening right during COVID. So they had to do post-production editing to change the story to do a whole, like, they had to go do reshoots and
to make it look like America didn't have anything to do with virus.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But I mean, I do hope that, again, just like let a good girl character be good. Let her be like, just, again, clever. Like, you can even kick butt. I don't care. Just like, don't tell me that, oh, I am a better assassin than you, white man. Just be the character and be like, try to be faithful to the comics. Like, that's a hope that I have, is that they're not trying to twist things and just, like, I don't know, Jane Foster in Thor, like, that actually was a comic book arc where she became Thor, and like that really was based on the comics. But the timing of it seemed like, oh, Thor's a big dum-dum who's not worthy of Mjolnir anymore, and so now we need to have like the woman hold Mjolnir because he can't and he's unworthy. It's like, you don't have to do that. Like, I actually don't have a problem if she also becomes Thor. You don't have to do it at the expense of Thor in order to make her also a powerful, good, interesting character. So I'm going to try to watch some things. I've committed to it, obviously in the interest of the show, but then also just trying to find good and trying to enjoy things. So I might even go back and try and watch some of the movies that have come out, because the last thing that I watched Marvel related was the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special. Now it's infinitely better than the Star Wars Christmas special. I don't know if you guys have ever watched that, but that's something
that's terrible.
That should not exist.
Real trip, that is. Yeah.
A friend of mine, we were having a Christmas party probably like 8 years ago, and he's like, "Hey guys, we should watch this." Puts it on, everybody literally leaves the party. It was just like it cleared the room. I was like, all right. But that was the last thing I watched. So I've missed like the new Ant-Man. I did not watch the sequel to Black Panther.
I think one of the things that happened to this like latest phase of Marvel is they got so derailed by that Kang actor getting in his legal troubles that it right, he was supposed to be the Thanos of this phase 3, 4, whatever, and so it just seems like it just screwed with all their plans, and so they had like no culminating anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be hard to ever repeat what they did with Endgame, and like I feel like that was a special moment in cinema that you can't really replicate that again, or they can try maybe, but it does seem like the sentiment around Marvel is improving, and it'll be interesting just to see how much this, like that letter to the studios and entertainment executives, like if that does actually bear fruit. I'm hopeful, so I want to try to find the good where it's good, and then, like, you know what, we're going to call out the bad where it's bad, and I think that's one of the things that we want to do, and we will do as new things come out. So I think, like, the three of us will watch Brave New World and we'll talk about it and say like, well, this was good, this was bad. Like, let's commend them where it needs to be commended, but then also try to bring some wisdom and some insight into things for the future. So we hope that other people will join us in this journey as we're trying to see Marvel king again, because I would love it. That would just be so awesome to start getting excited about Marvel movies and games again. Before we wrap up, boys, is there anything else you wanted to add to our Marvel discussion?
No, I'd say everybody who's listening should become a patron and come on over and listen to us debate on DC versus Marvel.
Yeah. Well, before
See
we
why
wrap up,
I'm right and Nate and Jordan are wrong.
Oh, well, before we wrap up, I just want to, there's a couple new upcoming releases in the next, I guess, into December that I just wanted to bring to people's attention that might be worth checking out. The first one is Star Wars Skeleton Crew that is releasing on December the 3rd. That actually looked interesting. I watched the trailer. Jude Law's in it. It had kind of like it was a bunch of kids, kind of like a Goonies kind of vibe to it, maybe, or like more like Stranger Things.
A Star Wars show with a male lead actor. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'll watch it. So so that looked interesting. A really interesting one. I'd forgotten all about this, but the Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, animated movie.
I watched a little thing of that, like the whatever YouTube trailer. Animation looks really cool. Story looks super chick boss. Unfortunately,
it is by Peter Jackson. Like, he's in charge of it, so might be. I'm curious to hear what some people think about that. Maybe some early reviews will tell me whether it's worth seeing or not. But that comes out on December 13th. And then
is that a in theater thing?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a movie release. And then this one we'll probably take. I'm sure we'll take our kids to it. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 comes out on December 20th. So over Christmas break, I will most certainly be taking our kids to see that. And then one more release that I think is worth mentioning for our video game fans, which I'm hesitant over this one, but Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. It's a game coming out by Bethesda. They usually make really good games. They did get the Indiana Jones property to do that. I know, Ben, you are leery of Indiana Jones and things they're doing to it, but
it's not going to have a 700-year-old Harrison Ford starring in.
It's actually
the game starts in family court, actually, where he's losing custody of the children.
But I mean, one of my favorite video games ever is Uncharted, which is basically just Indiana Jones. So I mean, if all they do is just make an Uncharted but with a fedora and a whip,
I'm here for it.
I hope they do. And they actually have Troy Baker. He's the voice actor and for the game, and he's awesome. He's done great work in other games, and so just replicate that, but just do it with Indiana Jones, have the humor of that, the world. I'm all for it. So I guess we'll find out. Again, Bethesda usually makes really good games, so I'm hopeful, but I'm also not going to go and spend what is $90. Actually, I have an Xbox, so I would just get Game Pass for a month if I wanted to play it. But for those who are interested, that is coming out on December 9th. So that is all we have for today, everybody. So just a reminder again that you can watch all of our episodes on YouTube, subscribe on podcast services around the world, and like Nate mentioned, you can join us over at Patreon, where you'll get our exclusive shows and join our Patreon. But until then, stay nerdy.